One disappeared into silence. Another was beaten by the man she married. This is not a fairy tale about a 1,788-room palace or a $30 billion fortune. This is what happens to the children born inside it. Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah has ruled Brunei for over 50 years and fathered 12 children across 3 wives, heirs, athletes, lawyers, an international celebrity, and at least one daughter the palace would rather the world forgot. Some were given empires. Others were given silence. One was stripped of contact with her own mother. Another watched her husband lose every title he had for what he did to her behind closed doors. This is the real story of what wealth costs the people born to inherit it. 12 children, 3 queens, 1 throne. Before any single story can make sense, the architecture has to be understood. Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah has been married 3 times, and each marriage produced its own dynasty within the dynasty. His first wife and current Queen Saleha gave him 7 children, including the heir to the throne. His second wife, Mariam Abdul Aziz, a former flight attendant he married in 1981, gave him 4 more before their divorce, stripped her of her royal title. His third wife, the journalist Azrinaz Mazar Hakim, gave him 2 children before that marriage also ended, and the fallout from that ending is still being felt by the youngest of his daughters today. 12 children, 3 mothers, 1 family fortune estimated at over $30 billion, anchored by an Istana Nurul Iman palace, worth roughly $1.2 billion, 1,788 rooms, 257 bathrooms, a throne hall that seats 5,000 people who will never sit in it uninvited. Add to that a private car collection the Sultan himself amassed, once estimated at more than $5 billion across thousands of vehicles, and the scale of what these 12 children were born into becomes almost impossible to compare to anything an ordinary family would recognize as wealth. Every child born into this family inherited a share of that fortune. Not one of them inherited the right to choose an ordinary life. The eldest daughter, Princess Majeedah, married in a ceremony so extravagant that Whitney Houston was flown in to perform, at a reported cost north of $5 million for the entertainment alone. She waited until her 30s to marry, had 5 children, and has spent decades quietly running charitable foundations rather than chasing headlines. Her younger sister, Princess Majeedah, chose an even quieter path, a law degree, a religious life, and a decision to never marry at all, a choice almost unheard of for a princess in a monarchy where marriage is treated as a matter of state. Neither daughter's choice was accidental. Palace insiders describe a household where every marriage, every public appearance, and every foundation the Sultan's children attach their name to is quietly vetted for how it reflects on the crown, meaning even a princess's decision to stay single is, in its own way, a political statement about independence inside a system built on obedience. Rashidah's charitable work now spans education and healthcare initiatives valued in the tens of millions of dollars annually, giving her a form of influence that never required a husband's title to legitimize it. Majeedah, meanwhile, practices law quietly, appears at almost no royal functions, and has become something rare in this family. A princess the public genuinely knows almost nothing about, by her own design rather than the palace's. If a princess can turn down marriage inside one of the richest palaces on earth, what does that tell you about what money actually buys? Comment, freedom, if you think she made the right call. And the eldest children were only the beginning, because the son born to inherit the crown came with a fortune and a burden neither of his sisters would ever have to carry. The heir who was built, not born. Crown Prince Al-Muhtadi Billah is the reason the entire royal machine exists. As the eldest son of Queen Saleha, he was groomed from childhood for a job he never applied for, ruling a nation that generates the majority of its wealth from oil and gas reserves, worth an estimated $20 billion in proven output. He married a woman with no royal blood, Sarah Saleh, the daughter of a diplomat rather than a duchess, and together they have 4 children, including a young son, Prince Abdul Mateen, who is already being positioned as the next link in a chain of succession stretching back centuries. Being the heir in Brunei is not a ceremonial role. The Crown Prince holds real ministerial responsibilities, chairs government committees, and is expected to demonstrate competence long before he ever holds the crown, because the throne does not pass on ambition, it passes on proof. Every public appearance is scrutinized. Every decision is measured against a father who has ruled successfully for 5 decades and set a bar that is nearly impossible to match. His household alone is estimated to operate on a budget exceeding $15 million a year, covering security, staff, and the ceremonial obligations that come with being heir to one of the last absolute monarchies on the planet. Even his children's education is treated as a matter of state planning, with tutors, security details, and travel arrangements coordinated years in advance, a level of institutional oversight that leaves almost no room for a spontaneous childhood. Meanwhile, his half-sister from the second family, Princess Hafizah, took an entirely different route, building an actual career inside the Ministry of Finance, earning her position through work rather than birthright, and maintaining what palace insiders describe as one of the most stable and happy marriages in the entire family. Not every child in this dynasty wanted the spotlight. Some of them built quiet, functional lives, specifically because they watched what the spotlight did to their siblings. The Crown Prince's own children are already being groomed the way he once was. His eldest son attends select briefings on governance, is present at state functions from a young age, and is photographed at ceremonial events specifically designed to build public familiarity years before any real responsibility is handed to him. This is how the monarchy engineers continuity, not through a single dramatic handoff of power, but through decades of visibility, training, and carefully staged public trust building that begins in childhood and never really stops. For the heir's family, there is no such thing as an unscheduled appearance. But not every marriage inside this family ended in stability. Because one daughter's marriage became the story, the palace tried hardest to keep behind closed doors. The princess, who was mistreated by her husband, this is the part of the family the palace does not want discussed, and the part the public cannot stop asking about. Princess Majeedah, one of Queen Saleha's daughters, married into what looked, from the outside, like another arranged royal success story. It was not. Over the course of the marriage, reports that began as whispers among palace staff eventually became public knowledge that could not be suppressed, even in a country where criticizing the royal family is illegal. The marriage involved mistreatment, and the princess was, by multiple independent accounts, physically abused by her own husband. What makes this story remarkable is not just what happened, but what happened next. In most royal families, this kind of scandal is buried under a wall of silence, financial settlements, and non-disclosure. In Brunei, the response was blunt. The husband was formally stripped of every title, every honor, and every position of prestige he had acquired through marriage into the royal bloodline, a punishment reserved for the gravest offenses against the family's honor. His name was quietly erased from the register of royal in-laws, his official positions handed to someone else within weeks, and any public trace of his years inside the family scrubbed from state media archives. He walked away with nothing, having entered a marriage that once connected him to a fortune worth $30 billion and walked out with none of it. Princess Majeedah rebuilt her life afterward, moving into environmental and conservation work far removed from the palace machinery that once defined her. She rarely appears in public, gives no interviews, and has never spoken publicly about what happened during that marriage, leaving the world to piece the story together from what the palace could not fully contain. Her silence is not weakness. In a family where every word becomes headline material worth millions in media attention, her silence is the only form of control she has left. What the public rarely considers is how difficult it would have been for Majeedah to simply leave sooner. In most monarchies, and especially in Brunei, a royal divorce is not a private legal filing, it is a negotiation involving family councils, religious authorities, and the palace's own concern for how the story will be told once it inevitably becomes public. Every month she stayed was, by multiple accounts, a calculation about protecting her children, her extended family's reputation, and her own standing, rather than simple hesitation. When the decision finally came, it came with the full institutional weight of the monarchy behind it, which is precisely why the punishment for her husband was so swift and so total once it did. A princess with access to a $30 billion fortune was still mistreated behind closed doors, and money did nothing to stop it. Comment, Majeedah, if this story changed how you see royal marriages. And if you think the second family was spared this kind of drama, Wait until you hear what happened to the brother who was supposed to be the golden child of them all. Mariam's children and the brother, the world, never met. Mariam Abdul Aziz, the Sultan's second wife, gave him 4 children before her marriage ended in divorce, and each of those 4 lives took a dramatically different shape. The eldest, Prince Abdul Azim, was once considered the most charismatic and stylish of the Sultan's sons, a fixture of Southeast Asian high society, known for a private car collection reportedly worth more than $20 million, including some of the rarest hypercars ever built. He died in 2020 at the age of 38 after a long illness that the palace never fully disclosed to the public, a stark reminder that no fortune, however large, can purchase certainty over how much time a person actually has. His sister, Princess Ameerah, built a public identity as an accomplished equestrian and athlete, competing internationally and later marrying into another branch of the extended royal family, a union that consolidated wealth and bloodline within a single, tightly controlled circle. Their younger sister, Princess Fadzila, took a more athletic and public-facing path of her own, captaining women's sports teams and appearing at international competitions representing Brunei directly, a rare degree of visibility for a royal daughter in a monarchy that generally prefers its women photographed rather than heard from. And then there is the brother everyone actually recognizes. Prince Abdul Mateen, a Sandhurst-trained officer, a former Olympic-level equestrian, and improbably for a monarchy built on discretion, a full-blown international celebrity with over 5 million Instagram followers who treat his every appearance like a royal tour in its own right. His 2023 wedding was staged across 10 days of ceremonies and reportedly cost in excess of $18 million, eclipsing even his older half-brother's famously lavish celebration years earlier. Where Abdul Malik's wedding once set the standard for royal extravagance in Brunei, Abdul Mateen quietly, deliberately surpassed it, proof that in this family, even sibling rivalry gets measured in the tens of millions. Abdul Azim's death in 2020 sent a rare wave of visible grief through the palace, with the Sultan reportedly appearing publicly shaken at a funeral attended by regional royalty and heads of state, one of the only moments in decades where the private emotions of an otherwise tightly controlled monarch were allowed to be seen by ordinary citizens. His collection of cars, watches, and properties was quietly absorbed back into the family's broader holdings, a reminder that even the most personal possessions of a prince ultimately belong to the institution first and the individual second. Abdul Mateen, by contrast, has leaned fully into visibility, turning royal duty and social media fame into something closer to a modern brand, appearances at international events, partnerships with luxury labels, and a public image so polished that even his critics admit it has done more for Brunei's global profile than any government campaign in years. But fame and fortune were never distributed equally across all 12 children, because one daughter's story doesn't end in a wedding. It ends in silence. The daughter, who disappeared. Her name is Princess Ameerah, and she is the youngest child of the Sultan's third and final marriage to journalist Azrinaz Mazhar Hakim. That marriage ended in divorce, and what followed was not a clean separation but a prolonged, painful severing that reportedly left Azrinaz without regular contact with her own children for years, a consequence of custody arrangements dictated by royal protocol rather than family court, and enforceable in ways an ordinary divorced mother could never imagine fighting against. Princess Ameerah grew up largely removed from public life, educated internationally at institutions where tuition and living costs are estimated at well over $200,000 across her schooling years, insulated from scandal by distance and by the palace's tight control over what information about her reaches the public. But insulation is not the same as protection. Multiple reports over the years have described a strained, at times entirely severed, relationship between Ameerah and her mother, a woman who once stood at her side as a royal wife and was, after the divorce, treated by the palace machinery as an outsider with no claim to her own daughter's upbringing. This is the side of the story that never makes it into the headlines about jewels and palaces. A mother separated from her child, not by distance or circumstance, but by the deliberate architecture of a system designed to protect the institution of the monarchy above the emotional bonds of the people inside it. No court filing explains it, no palace statement confirms it, and no journalist has ever been granted the access required to tell the full story from Ameerah's own perspective, leaving the public with only fragments, assumptions, and the uncomfortable knowledge that somewhere inside that 1,788-room palace, a mother and daughter's relationship became collateral damage in a divorce neither of them fully controlled. Ameerah did not choose this. She was born into it, the same way her half-siblings were born into wealth they never had to earn. The difference is that wealth can be spent. A childhood spent without your mother cannot be refunded. There is a particular cruelty in how invisible this story remains compared to the weddings and the watches. When a prince marries in a 10-day ceremony worth $18 million, the world sees every photograph. When a mother is quietly cut off from her daughter, there are no photographs at all, only silence, a handful of unconfirmed reports, and a family whose control over its own narrative is strong enough to keep even a painful custody story almost entirely out of public view. Azrinaz has, at various points, spoken publicly about wanting a closer relationship with her children, statements that were met with palace silence rather than denial, an absence of response that, in a monarchy this controlled, often speaks louder than any official comment would. 12 children, 3 mothers, and fortunes worth billions, and yet almost none of them got to choose the one thing that actually mattered, what the crown actually costs. Step back far enough, and the pattern across all 12 lives becomes impossible to ignore. Every child of Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah was born into a fortune exceeding $30 billion, a palace worth $1.2 billion, and a level of material security most people on earth will never come close to experiencing. And yet almost none of them got to simply live. One was mistreated inside her own marriage and had to watch the family strip her husband's titles just to restore a fraction of her dignity. One died young after a private battle the public was never allowed to fully understand. His fortune quietly folded back into a family balance sheet that will never publish an obituary alongside its financial statement. One was separated from her mother by rules she had no say in writing. One built a genuinely happy, stable life specifically by choosing a ministry desk over a palace throne. And one turned into a global celebrity almost by accident, simply for being visible in a family built on discretion. The lesson embedded in all 12 stories is the same one wealthy families rarely want their children or their audiences to hear out loud. Money can buy privacy, but it cannot buy peace. It can buy a wedding with Whitney Houston flown in to perform. It cannot buy a mother back her daughter's phone calls. It can buy a hypercar collection worth $20 million. It cannot buy a 38-year-old prince more time. The Bolkiah children did not choose the palace they were born into, the marriages that were arranged around them, or the scrutiny that followed every headline. What they chose, in the small margins left to them, was how to survive it, with silence, with distance, with careers, or with 5 million followers watching their every move. 12 children, 3 queens, and a fortune worth $30 billion, and still, half of them ended up broken by the very system built to protect them. Which of these 12 lives affected you the most? Tell me in the comments. Before you go, here are 3 strategic truths from this story. First, a fortune protects reputation before it protects the people inside it. When Princess Majeedah's husband mistreated her, the palace's first move was not a court case or a public reckoning. It was a title stripped and a name quietly erased from the record. The system moved fast enough to protect the family's honor. It was never fast enough to have prevented the harm in the first place. In a family worth $30 billion, image is often the first asset defended, and the person who was hurt is left to rebuild everything else on her own. Second, access to billions cannot buy back a severed relationship. Princess Ameerah grew up with an education worth $250,000 and a childhood insulated by palace walls, and none of it could restore the years she reportedly spent without regular contact with her own mother. Royal protocol can dictate custody, control access, and manage the narrative, but it cannot manufacture the bond it took away. Some losses simply do not have a price tag attached, no matter how large the family's balance sheet. Third, the children who built the quietest lives often built the most stable ones. Princess Hafeeza's career at the Ministry of Finance and Princess Rashida's decades of low-profile charity work stand in sharp contrast to the siblings whose lives played out in headlines, weddings, and scandal. In a family where visibility is currency, Choosing invisibility may have been the smartest inheritance decision of all 12 children, proof that inside the world's most scrutinized palace, peace was never for sale. But it was, occasionally, something a few of them managed to build anyway. It is a strange kind of arithmetic, one no financial advisor could ever teach. The children who inherited the least public attention may, in the end, have inherited the most actual freedom. 12 children entered this world with more financial security than most nations possess, and 12 children still had to navigate grief, betrayal, isolation, and public scrutiny with the same raw vulnerability as anyone else. The palace can dictate protocol, arrange marriages, and manage headlines, but it cannot dictate how a human being processes losing a brother, a marriage, or a mother. That gap between what money can control and what it cannot is the real inheritance every one of the Sultan's children carries, whether the world ever sees it or not. If this story pulled back the curtain on a dynasty most people only see through wedding photos and net worth headlines, hit subscribe and turn on notifications for Billionaire Story, because next time, we are stepping inside another royal family where the fortune is even larger, the secrets run even deeper, and the truth behind the smiling photos is something the palace has spent decades trying to keep the world from ever finding out.